Rise of Kingdoms, one of the events that has been getting a little bit more love recently, has seen a few changes, is Sunset Canyon. It has seen a whole entire new event added to it, called the Canyon Clash, not to mention it still has Lost Canyon and normal Sunset Canyon. So you'll notice that Sunset Canyon is gradually becoming slightly more important for all players. So today, I'll be remaking my Sunset Canyon in-depth guide, teaching you how to set up your defensive marches and your offensive marches to give you the best potential of winning. Not to mention, I'll give you some of the best pairings, and I'll also go over the new Canyon Clash event so that it is completely understandable. So if you're interested in the Canyon Clash event, how it works, and also how to properly set up your marches, since sometimes just the formation itself can help you win, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off today's video. Before we get into the juicy tips such as going over how to set up your marches, let's just go over the general consensus for some of the best Canyon marches that you can actually run, because Canyon is a bit different to the open field, and you will notice that. To get these marches today, I'm going to be honest, I've just looked through some of the best Canyon players I can find across a couple of kingdoms, and that's how I've come to my conclusion as to what the top marches usually are. I've looked at a lot of top players, people who are like the top Canyon players I've personally met, and I've looked at a few other bigger kingdoms to see what their top Canyon marches are. And there are a few general marches I've seen in every single Canyon lineup. Anyone that's rank 1, rank 2, rank 3 have got all 3 of these marches. The first one is every single Canyon lineup I've looked at pretty much has Azul Lang and Hermann. The reason is Hermann really good, fairly fast debuffs, because in Canyon you want those fast debuffs, you want that fast damage, and Azul Lang ridiculous AoE. It's the main DPS march I see in pretty much all Canyon lineups, and without it, most Canyon lineups cannot go nearly as far. So Azul Lang with a Hermann, easily one of the top Canyon marches. Really having the AoE damage is what makes it super amazing, so some form of an AoE march will do really, really good here. Another march that I've seen pretty much everywhere is Nevsky and Joan. This is a good fast march that you'll try to put into your top lanes whenever you are defending, and we'll go over that soon. But it's good, it's fast, fast-paced, double active skills on Joan, fairly tanky march through Nevsky, so it's an overall good Canyon march, and I've seen it pretty much everywhere. The last march that I've seen on almost every single lineup is something with a Leo Chair, whether it be a Leo Chair Alex, Leo Chair or William Leo Chair, or a Scipio Leo Chair. That is a pretty much guarantee. I've seen it in all 3, not 3 Canyon lineups, but I've seen it in the top 3 marches of all Canyon lineups that I've looked at, and it is probably, again, one of the main ones. It's got smite damage, it's fast, punchy damage, some of the best commanders in the game, between Leo Chair and Alex, Scipio or William. So that is a pretty much guarantee with all the Canyon lineups. Not to mention the commanders I just mentioned to you, they're all the newest, strongest, most shiny commanders. So of course, they're going to be ridiculously good in Sunset Canyon because they are just the strongest ones on the open field. From there, another recurring trend I've seen, and this is something that might surprise a few people, is the trend of there pretty much always being a Trajan in every single lineup. Pretty much every lineup I've seen has a Trajan, usually with a Mulan. I've seen 1 or 2 with an Ethelfled, but usually it's a Trajan with a Mulan as the supporting Canyon march. This is often what I can tell to be the tankier march. Trajan is a fairly tanky commander. He does need some time to get ramped up though, so he might not be the most tanky, but he does have some tankiness, so I see him usually as a little bit of a tanking march. Not to mention, good buffs, he gives you rage, he debuffs the enemies. Same thing with Mulan, she gives you a ton of stats, and again, makes you a lot more tanky. So Mulan and also Trajan, they're both buffing and debuffing enemies, and they tend to have a lot of value in Sunset Canyon, a little bit more than they do on the open field. Not to mention, it is one of the main places you can still really use these 2 commanders, so I do often see them in Sunset Canyon, and pretty much every single top lineup best in the game is using a Mulan or some type of commander that is buffing with a Trajan or debuffing in the form of Ethelfled. So pretty much I've guaranteed that if you're in the top 5 or 10 of Sunset Canyon, especially a Lost Canyon, you'll pretty much have a Trajan every single time. So Trajan, top of Canyon, almost always see him. He is still a really good commander for Canyon just for his debuffs and his buffs. The last Canyon commander I see quite often is Constantine. Constantine in every single Canyon, again, if you're in the top 10 or so, you'll have a Constantine because he has a ridiculous instant heal and he's just dumb tanky. A lot of people will time out fighting a Constantine because of how tanky he is, and you'll notice sometimes in some Canyon fights, it ends up with just a Constantine versus Constantine, and no one wins and it ends up in a draw. So Constantine, one of the tankiest commanders in the game, and you'll notice that he's pretty much in every lineup. Some people run stuff like Constantine Martel, Constantine Richard is probably the most popular, and then I've seen recently a little bit of a rise in stuff like Constantine Sargon, or even Guan Constantine if you have your Scipio with Leo Chair. So I've seen that. It's a bit of a rising march, the Guan Constantine and the Sargon Constantine, but these other two tanky commanders, Richard and Martel, are tried and true, and most people who have a Richard expertise and a Constantine will put them together and make a really strong Canyon march. So that is probably another one of the most popular and, within my opinion, the top 5 Canyon marches that you would end up running. So in my opinion, the best 5 marches, if you were to really pick, it would be a Zulang with a Herman, a Nevsky with a Joan Prime just for the really tanky fast cav damage, something with Leo Chair, preferably William Wallace is what I've seen to be the best march and the most commonly used for the top ranked players, and then you've got something with a Trajan, something such as a Trajan Mulan is often used, it is the most common Trajan march that I've seen, and then finally, Constantine with another commander, often Richard. So that's the top 5 Canyon marches. A couple of substitutes if you don't have some of these commanders. Houchebing with Mehmed is a common march that I've seen it quite a bit. Also Houchebing with Belisarius Prime, because Belly Prime is an instant debuff. Again, I've seen that quite a bit. I've seen a ranged march in a couple of Canyon lineups. It's a bit rare, but I have seen it. And I've seen Pakal and Harold, that's Moctezuma, but I've seen Pakal and Harold as well in a couple of lineups. So they're just a couple substitute marches. Also Boudica Assurbanipal I've seen, and also Guan Scipio. So they are usually within like the top 30 to 40 people who are in Canyon. They're never really the rank ones who have these older or more substitute marches, because these commanders, while they're better on the open field, they're not the best in Canyon, because Canyon needs fast, punchy, and relatively tanky commanders, and most of these commanders are missing one of those aspects. Maybe they're not the most punchy, maybe they're not the most tanky, and it does kind of screw them over in the long run. So a lot of these commanders, they work well in Canyon, but they wouldn't be your number 1 picks if you do have the access to stuff like Constantine or Richard, who will just be slightly stronger. So now the next thing I would like to talk about are your Canyon march formations, how you're going to set your Canyon marches up, because the way you set them up will really influence your trades when you are fighting, because when you set up your Canyon marches, if you do it right, you're literally just going to be able to angle your commanders better and allow yourself to win more Canyon fights. There are 2 forms of a Canyon lineup. You've got a top lineup, which is more used for offensively fighting, and you've got a bottom lineup, which is more used for your defense. Now, when it comes to running a Canyon lineup, when you're doing defense, you want to go with a bottom lineup, and the reason you do this is because it's all about the way your commanders swing. Now, the way that these bottom lane and top lane marches work, it's all about how your commanders run, and really it's all about this square right here. This square is where your most DPS heavy commander is going to go, because when you start a Canyon fight on defense, your commanders in this square will swing upwards. They'll go over your top march, which is the tank march, and they will hit your opponents at this top area here. And this will pretty much allow your top commander, especially if they have a circular AoE, to hit every single one of your opponents, because your Gilgamesh will swing up into your enemy's defense or swing forward depending on where they put their troops, and your Zulang will either go over him or it will go around like this. So this will pretty much create a situation where your main AoE commander is being your most tanky. On top of this, your top left march will come pretty much directly into the combat, or they will go straight forward into your enemies. So often you want to have a tankier march, or a march that is just there to be a bit of a cannon fodder so your other marchers can deal more damage. So if my Henry didn't have YSG and didn't have equipment, and you had 5 good marches, which I personally don't have, but if you do have 5 good marches, I'd put your tankiest march here. Often Constantine, whoever it is, you'd put them there and they'd run directly in your enemies, and they will be your main tank and they'll take the brunt of the force. Usually what I see the trend is either Constantine or your Trajan will go in this top left corner, since they will do the brunt of the tanking for you. From there, you've got another 3 marches that matter. You've got your front row and you've got your back middle row, I guess the back bottom row here. Now on defense, your front row of these, they're just going to run pretty much directly forward, or they're going to go up into your enemies, depending on where they've set their marches up. So again, these commanders will swing upwards. They can't swing down because there's nothing to do there. So they're going to swing upwards into your enemies, and then you'll have these 2 marches working again as more tanky marches, and this back march will swing up and it will also deal AoE damage. So really what you want to generally do with your defense, if you don't have a weird mix of commanders like I do, tankier commanders towards the front and the top left corner, and then your AoE DPS at the back so they can swing upwards and deal AoE into your enemies. So depending on how you've set them up defensively, your AoE at the back should swing up like this, and the bottom row should swing down like this, giving you a double AoE coverage, and then your top marchers should swing up into your enemies and take the brunt of the force with your top left back row march. This is your offlane march usually. So this again, they will charge directly in and they will take again the brunt of the force. So these two AoE DPS marches can do a lot of the work. Obviously, you still want these marches to be solid. I mean, you're not going to win every single Canyon. If you're running a Nebu Gilgamesh like I am, you're going to lose. I lose a lot in Canyon. I've only got 3 good marches. I don't have many expertise commanders, so I lose the majority of my Canyons. But if you have better commanders, you've got those close to meta marches, maybe you run 5 open field marches, you'll be able to win more if you have a formation like this on your defense, or at least it will allow you to defend slightly more often. When it comes to doing offense, you're pretty much just going to invert exactly what you did on your defense, because it's going to do the same thing, but because you're doing offensively, it's going to be mirrored. So if you had your troops down here, so for example, if my Zhulang was up here, he'd swing down like this, and it's not going to work as well against your opponent's defense because he's going to end up in the middle of everything, tanking all the AoE. But if your Zhulang is up here, he's going to swing around like this or swing up and down like this, depending on where your opponents are defending, and he's not going to take as much damage. Not to mention your other marchers should swing forward into your enemies and they should tank. Also, your offline march should do the same thing. So when you're fighting, they are going to swing more into your enemies, and you will notice that when you're fighting other people. Now, just as an example here, you can see that my marchers have first gone into the offline march here. They're going to kill that march. My march hopefully can store for long enough, and then they're going to swing down, and you'll notice that my tankier marchers do hit first, and they're going to take the brunt of the impact, and you can see my Zhulang and my Boudica are both on the outer edge, while my Henry and Gilgamesh are tanking so they can deal damage. So you'll notice Henry, Gilgamesh, and Nebu, they all died, but my main AoE DPS marchers, they're not even damaged. Of course, I definitely outpower this person, it's a farm account, but in a real situation, you saw how that worked. If you had a tankier march in your offlane, you can delay your opponents for longer, allowing your marchers to kill the other offlane march, swing down, the AoE marchers will deal as much damage as they can, and your main tanking marchers will take the brunt of the force. So that is what we can really notice when it comes to fighting in Sunset Canyon, and you saw that in the offensive formation, and my opponent was running the defensive formation there. So you'll notice how that works. Offense and defense are pretty much reciprocating, and your goal is just to out-tank them and then deal as much damage as you can with your 2 back row marches. Now, the last thing I would like to note with your Canyon lineups and setups, when it comes to fighting offensively, if your opponents have done this exact setup here, you just want to do the opposite. So for example, if your opponents have put all their marches in this top corner, put your offensive marches in the bottom and you will swing up and it should do the same thing. But on defense, I recommend just going in the bottom. It is the most common choice. But if you do put your marches in the top up here, often people will just have to mirror their marches and put them down here. So whatever your opponents do, just do the opposite and you will get a good trade. But make sure when you do the opposite, your marches are set up in the exact mirrored order, otherwise it can mess up your trade a little bit. The final thing I will talk about is the Canyon Clash event, and this event is relatively new. I think we've had 3 Canyon Clashes so far, and it's got some pretty decent rewards. You can earn quite a few gems from just partaking, and you can also get some transmutation stones and a couple of resources out of this. So this event, it's nice, it's pretty good, and it's really just free. All you have to do is set up a bunch of Canyon marches, and you can pretty much just fight against your opponents. Now, the way you win is by getting as many banners from your opponents as possible, and these banners, I'm pretty sure, have some form of a challenge to them. So for example, you can have a banner that's like, defeat your opponents without losing a commander, or defeat your opponents within a certain time period, and you should earn some banners. That is what I remember it to be. You get an amount of banners, so I'm pretty sure you start off with getting the golden banners, then the purple, then the blue, or the other way around, and your goal is just to get as many as possible. So if you defeat your opponents without losing a single march, you get like 3 banners or something, which is a really high amount, and you get something like 5 different attacks. So here's the requirements actually. If you reduce the enemies to less than 50% units, you get 1 banner. If you defeat all of them, you get 2. And if you finish it without losing more than 2 of your troops, you can get 3 banners total. So that is the most you can earn pretty much for each requirement that you meet, and if you can get 3, it's the best. So if you can defeat your opponents without losing more than 2 of your troops, which is rare, you will get the highest amount of banners. As you can see, under each person, there is a number of banners displayed, so if you want to get the most banners possible, you should try and attack someone that still has full banners, or has enough banners for you to take all of them. So if someone has all of their requirement 1 banners taken, which I think are the gold ones or the blue ones, then you probably don't want to attack them because you won't be able to earn those banners. So your goal is to go with the people with the most banners and try and get the most banners as an alliance to win the event overall. The winners of the event, I'm pretty sure, get a couple of extra points, or they get some type of ranked rewards. Let me just double check it. The winners get a total of 116,000 gems, and you will get up to 1,000 gems on your account. Not to mention, at the end of each battle, you get those coins. I showed you the shop there where you can redeem them. So really, this is just a bunch of free stuff for having Canyon, and if you just follow the lineup tips that I gave you, you'll be able to pretty much just give yourself a slightly better chance of winning on defense and also in a combat situation. So if you follow those tips, even though they're not the most advanced, you will notice that you're going to get a relatively good win-to-lose ratio, especially if you have much better commanders than I do for Canyon. So if you don't have a weird account like mine, and you've got like 5 sets of equipment, and you're able to use it all in Canyon, you'll pretty much get a very, very good trade in terms of wins and losses. Majority of the time you will be winning. Since most people don't follow this, they just clump all their marches together. If you set your marches up slightly differently, you will have a better chance of winning in Canyon, which is always great. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to ask you guys to please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a really, really small thing that you can all do, and it supports me a lot. So subscribing to the channel is very helpful. It's very much appreciated. And everyone who has subscribed already, a massive thank you to you. And to everyone who is just subscribing now, an even bigger thank you to you as well. So if you found today's video useful, if you're interested in more Canyon tips, whatever it may be, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It supports me a lot and it is much appreciated. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.